start, I want to talk about the creative process because when it comes to designing experiences, workshops, sessions, whatever, it is a creative process and it can be chaotic. And sometimes you will get to points where you feel like you have no idea what you're doing. Don't worry, that's fine. Just completely trust the process. Um, and there are different models and ways in which you can, I suppose, approach the way you design workshops. So I come from a MG Taylor background. That's what we do in my day job, which is a type of human-centered design approach, albeit a bit differently. It stems from adult learning theory, and basically it's all about finding different ways, giving people different assignments, and also using different frameworks to get people to think about how they can solve problems in a more systematic way. So one of the frameworks that MG Taylor has is the creative process model, which you see here. And I don't want to dive too much into it, but the main point of this is to just remind you that the creative process can be a bit squiggly and chaotic, but it's also cyclical. So it will always change. It never really sets in stone. So when you are designing a workshop and even delivering a workshop, things can change at any point at any time. And hot tip is to just trust the process and actually go with the flow, and sometimes even improvise if you need to, because sometimes when you are running a session, you want to make tweaks or adjust based on the vibe of the room, based on how people are responding to the material that you're presenting. It's never, you never have a set agenda because that agenda will always change. I like to see, and I suppose, framing design as it's almost like you're writing a play or you're writing a restaurant. The experience is like, it's all about creating memorable experiences for people. And as a facilitator, you're almost like a performer. So if you kind of put your performing hat on, it helps to kind of think of it in that way. Also, I am using my laptop today. So if there are questions, Sas, could you just like mic up because I can't see people at the moment when I'm sharing screen.
Yes, no problem at all.
Thank you. So I thought the easiest way to learn how to design a session is to do it as a demo. So I thought maybe for this session, we can kind of use this case study. And let's say we're going to build a financial literacy program for international students. That's the case study that we're going to use for today. And to take us through it, I've put basically my steps at the bottom, and we're going to go through each step one by one so that you can understand how you can approach designing a session for a community that might be a bit vulnerable, that might be young. We'll also talk about ethics as well at some point, just to get you thinking about how you can continue maintaining safe spaces when you are holding workshops or events with vulnerable communities. So when you're prepping, I always use a co-design approach when you are designing your workshop or session. You hear this a lot where you can't create community for people, you have to create it with people. The same thing applies to when you are creating workshops or sessions. And it's almost like, again, writing a play. So you want to first audition people and gather your design team. And when I say design team, I'm talking about the group of people who are part of your community. These are people that are your end users or the people who are your customers. And you want to select maybe about 4 to 7 of them to be part of the design team so that you can actually co-create and design this session with them. So when co-designing this session, you want to also think about who you're going to recruit for this role and treat it like a role. So I highly recommend creating a job description so that you can, have an understanding of the kind of people you want to include in your design team. And then when you are creating that job description, think about gender balance, cultural background, ethnicity background, career and life stages. I've put some considerations there, and we will send this out to you after the session, so you don't have to spend time reading everything and writing notes. But basically, you want to have a nice team where it is diverse, the experiences are mixed, and also, think about the kind of backgrounds they have, and any accessibility needs that they might need to also be built in. For example, like physical accessibility, or if they're neurodiverse. So have some thinking around that. And then some reminders. Oh, actually, I'll move this to the left first. The fun thing about Miro is you can present it and then also use it as a whiteboard at the same time. Let me just move that there. So as a design team, the purpose of that is, again, like to really identify what outcomes you want to get out of your session. What are the outputs? What deliverables do you need? What are the things that are in and out? What's in scope, what's out of scope? And also think about issues, key risks, any questions that you want to answer as well as part of that session. And then also your design team, aka your community, are also there to give you input on any research they've heard, or any like data resources that you need to consider to build into that workshop as well. Some reminders that I've also put there for myself and for you. Job description, I've already covered that. So making sure that you have a clear outline of who you're looking for, what the expectations are, how much time you need from them, and also what can they get out of volunteering their time to co-design this session with you. You really want to be clear on this, because once clarity and transparency is what builds trust and safety. People tend to get anxious when they don't know, or they don't have the right information to support them in making decisions. So you want to make sure that the people you're asking have all the information they need to then be able to, say, hey, yeah, I'm sure I'm happy to sign up and be part of your design team to give you some input. If you're using lived experience participants, so that's people with, potentially like a background or lived experience of mental health challenges or homelessness, it could be anything really. Make sure you also reimburse people for their time, because they are an SME or a subject matter expert. So you need to treat them as such. They're not here to give you free advice or free work. So you can either reimburse them in terms of like, I don't know, food vouchers, or cover, if you're doing in-person stuff and in-person meetings, cover their travel expenses, like taxis, anything like that. So have a think again on how you can reimburse your participants, because they're there again as SMEs. They're not there to volunteer and share their own experiences for free, because sometimes re-experiencing and retelling their story can also be re-traumatizing. So we want to make sure that we are not taking advantage of them, and that we are seeing them as an expert, not as someone who's just a volunteer. Building and maintaining safety by practicing transparency. Again, I've mentioned that already. And we listen and we don't judge, especially if you're working with vulnerable communities. And we also make sure we don't tell people what to do. We're there to learn from them. They're meant to teach us more about their experiences, and we're meant to just learn from them. Yes. So for our case study, where let's say, we want to design our workshop for international students. Let's have a think, potential, like, I suppose, characteristics that we want to think about when we are potentially building our design team. It could be, we could think about maybe getting, let's say we want 4 people, and we want to have nice gender balance. And if we're working with international students, maybe we could look into 4 different universities that we could reach out to, so that we can get a good spread. We might want to also consider what they're studying, so academic backgrounds. And we could also consider their cultural backgrounds. For example, some cultures, well, actually, a lot of cultures have some stigma when it comes to finance or talking about finance. So we want to make sure that we have that covered as well. For example, like Islamic finance, they actually approach borrowing and loaning differently to Western approaches. So, yeah, that's something to consider if we are designing a workshop for international students when it comes to finance. So, yeah, basically, like at this stage, I would just kind of jot down like different characteristics, like as you can see here, to think about who I want to be a part of my design team. And then I would also think about the ask from them. So, let's say in the lead up to our workshop, we want to have 3 planning co-design sessions with them. Co-design sessions. And each session could be 1.5 hours long. We can do it online so that no one has to travel anywhere. And it could be like maybe you do 1 session a week or 1 session a fortnight. So that's kind of how I would start first, with just thinking about your design team and who you want to invite to be part of that. And then you also want to think about your own project team. And at this stage, it might just be yourself, and then someone to support with like comms or logistics as well. So yeah, it could be something like that. Okay, so then next is you have your people, you've gathered them all your students, brought them together, they've agreed to support you in designing this session. You then want to do your first session with them or your first meeting with them. And in the first meeting, you want to scope out your parameters. So these parameters basically act to guide how you're going to design the full workshop. And it's also basically the bare bones or the framework that you're going to use to then make sure you are designing in a way that hits all the targets that you want, that helps you get the outcomes you want, and also make sure that you've put in all the safety measures in place if relevant as well. So we want to think about our scope. So what's in and out for this session. You want to think about what objectives you want to get out of the session. This is basically a list of action items. So you want to use verbs, so action words like learn or understand or I don't know, practice, experiment, like it's just actiony words. Givens are things that we know are to be true. So it could be things like international students struggle with financial literacy. Like they're just facts and things that we need to consider when we are designing a session. Inputs is basically anything that you need to bring into the session. So that could be research, it could be photos, it could be quotes, it could be posters, reports. Like it's literally anything, any kind of data that we need to bring into the session. Outputs are things we want to get out of the session. So this could be like a financial plan, it could be a report, it could be a bunch of photos you want to use as collateral. So outputs are basically tangible things that you can physically hold and touch. And outcomes are intangible. So things like learnings, knowledge, or skills that people have gained. So it's not a physical product, but it's still an outcome. And then we also want to think about stakeholders. Who do we want to invite? Who do we want to guest speak if we need to? Do we want to have any keynote speakers? Do we want to partner with any organizations like a university student council, for example? So who are the stakeholders that we need to think about? And then what are potential risks, barriers, or challenges that we need to also think about? Whether that's psychological safety, whether that's physical needs, like are people coming from different universities, maybe a virtual event would be better than a in-person because of travel needs. Are people going to need some accessibility requirements like vision? Like, do we need to use more tactile objects as opposed to visual objects, for example? So I know this is a lot, but these are the things I like to think about when you first, like, even before you think about the agenda or what you want to do, you need to think about these elements first so that you can then not get a bit too lost in the weeds when you are designing a session, and you also have an anchor point. But these basically set the I suppose the sandpit in which you're going to play in when you are designing your session. So coming back to the case study, um, so if we are, organizing a session to improve financial literacy for international students, I suppose our scope would be, again, like it's also the title, so the financial literacy workshop for international students for 2025. So you want to have the what, you want to have the who, and you want to have the when in your scope. Some example objectives. So I always like to say together we will, because we're all about collaboration here. So together we will learn more about how to budget easily, how to understand maybe Australia's tax system, how to get a tax file number and apply for a bank account. And we want them to create a high level financial plan that suits their needs. What are some givens? Well, we know that international students come from diverse backgrounds with different financial backgrounds as well. We know that mental health and suicide rates of international students continue to grow, with isolation and financial stress being key stressors. Also, most international students need to find part time or casual work, but they also don't have access to government schemes. So you can kind of, the list can go on, but it's nice to just have them up there so that, again, you are aware of what are the, I suppose, boundaries in which you need to work in. Potential input. So it could be, we could give the students a financial budget tracker. We could give them a roadmap template or journal questions. We'd want to have PowerPoint slides if you're doing presentations, or a mural or Miro if you're doing an online session. Basically, yeah, this is just, it's like when you're baking a cake and you need all the ingredients, your input is basically your ingredients. And then physical outputs, it could be that each student at the end gets a financial plan created by them, and they also get a financial planning guide that they can bring home. And then potential outcomes, the students could feel more confident in taking charge of their financial planning. They might have a stronger understanding of the tax system. And then stakeholders, it could be university clubs, it could be Study Melbourne, which is a organization that supports international students. Could be other non-for-profits like maybe Beyond Blue that you want to partner with, or on-campus support services. Potential risks are cultural challenges like stigma, as I mentioned, and also international students tend to be taken advantage of and might not know what their working rights are. So it could be something that we address in the workshop as well. Oh, this one's not working. Hold on. And then, questions we might want to have before we start the session is, what resources do they need? How are they actually supporting themselves now? And what are the best practice guidelines? What are cultural considerations? So I would say this part, before you start even designing your agenda, this is the very important part of designing. It also can inform how you write your comms when you are sending out invitations to people as well. Okay, so now that you've got your scope, objectives, and givens, you're going to then start designing your plate. I like to do it very simply on a whiteboard again, like this, where you start with what kind of your modules. Oh, sorry, I'll go from the left. So you got your time there. So how much time you want to put to each module. Intention. So this is really handy to have behind your module, so that you can understand, like, what is the intention of this activity? What's the intention of this presentation? Because sometimes people would, put a presentation up just for the heck of doing it, but then there's no intention. And as a result, people in the audience just get really bored, or they don't really understand why it's there. And so thinking about the intention helps you design mindfully and with intent. And so it's much more impactful as well. And then you could put key questions or messages that you want. And again, remember, it is always iterative. Hence, I don't really call this an agenda. I usually call this a design, because a design means that it will always change, even if you are delivering the session itself. Whereas an agenda is very rigid. It's almost like you have to stick to the agenda, like minute by minute. But we know in real life, this never really happens when you're running workshops. You need to actually give space for things to change or for things to evolve. And that's what makes a session or a workshop much more engaging, is to having that, I guess, a bit 10% or like 20% of space for serendipity to happen as well. So let's say our session, we're going to start with a welcome, an introduction. Then we could do a introduction to basic finance, and that could be like a talk. And then after that, we could put maybe the students in different groups. So whenever I do group work, I like to use separate lines like this. And you could be like group 1, group 2, group 3. And then you slowly build your modules. And after you've built your modules, you then think about the intent as well. So welcome and introduction. What's the intention of that? Well, we want to just warmly welcome participants into the room. And then what's the intent of introducing what basic finance is? Well, it is to say provide information on Australia's finance system, so that everyone is aligned. And then you can go into group work to give people a chance to reflect on what they've learned. And then I would also then put in key questions next. And then time, I always do very last. Like, I don't stress about time because you can always adjust it later on. What you want to do, I think the main point here is to think about like your modules, intent, and key messages, and then continue to build from there. Basically, with the structure of a session, let's say like this is the duration of your session from start to finish. At the start, you want to like think about scanning. So what is the information do the people in the room need to know? What are the information that's out there in the world? So you want to do a scan of like what the information is, what the data is, and this is where your inputs come into play. Once you've had a scan of everything that you need to know, then you can like think about focusing. Okay, like based on the outcomes and outputs that we outlined earlier, what do we need to focus on? And then towards the end of the workshop or session, that's when the action starts. So like you can put people into groups and get them to start thinking about building something or writing a plan or allocating tasks. So action usually comes at the end. But in terms of the structure of I suppose, session or workshop, you can kind of think of it in terms of scan, focus, and act. So here we've got scan is, learning about the basic introduction to finance. Focus will get the students to like in groups think about what they've heard. And an action later, we could get them to start brainstorming their first financial roadmap, as an example. So once you've got like a mud map of this with your design team, in your follow-up workshop, follow-up session or meeting with your design team, you can then add more detail to it. So, before we've already done our modules, our intent, and our processes, next we want to think about, okay, what are the inputs that we need? Who's going to take ownership of that? How much time do we need? And then here, I also like to put a mod identifier number. And you basically just continue building this out. And then once you have a stronger idea of what that design will look like, you can then put this into an Excel and start adding more detail. And then in your Excel, you can turn it into a planner to put all your things like the scope, objectives, givens that we did earlier. You'll put your, I call it a straw dog. So this design, I would call it a straw dog because it's like a rough, straw man. Oh, yeah, rough straw man. But instead of using man, I like to say dog because it's a bit more fun that way. um, You want to put your invite list in the Excel, your budget, comms plan. So you have just basically a one-stop shop of where everything is. Cool. Okay. So now you've kind of done your design, you've roughly know what your session will look like. Let's think about logistics and planning. And I know based on some of your feedback, you wanted to think about different mods or different types of workshops. Basically, there's two types. There's a secret third, but I really don't like the secret third. I'd love to see if you guys can guess what the secret third is. I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Oh, okay, never mind. So there's two types of workshops, online or in person. If you can guess what the secret third is, hats off to you. But it's the one that's basically missing here. Yeah, hybrid. That was quick. I'll start with online. So with online and in person, there are considerations you need to think about when you are delivering an event. So I am actually curious to think what you guys think about this. So I might ask you to put in the chat what you think are the considerations for logistics and planning when it comes to these modalities. I suppose hybrid workshop, hybrid is very interesting. I can talk more about hybrid if people want to hear more about it.
I suppose in person you need your sticky notes and stuff like that, all those kind of things.
But you could also do that online. One person can't do it all. Yeah. So the funny thing is with online and in person, the considerations are the same. So you really, it's very you don't really get too stuck in the detail of like the how. Think about the what. So in terms of considerations, number one, accessibility. So online, that's accessibility online would be closed captions. It could be whether or not people have Wi-Fi access or laptops even. In person, it could be the physical space. Like, are there ramps for people with wheelchairs? Are there speakers for those who are hard of hearing, or lighting if you're low vision blindness? Is it too bright for people? In terms of consent and safety plans, so if you are working with vulnerable communities, especially if they are young, like minors or young people, you want to get because with workshops, people tend to take lots of photos, and I highly recommend taking photos of the work so that you can also look back later and think about what kind of outputs came out of the session. You want to get people's consent that you can take photos of them, and that includes online as well, because you might want to take screenshots of people as well. In terms of safety plans, so if you are working with people with lived experience and your workshop will be with young people who experience homelessness, or it could be young Asian women who are refugees or something like that, you want to have a plan for you and your team to protect yourself. So in your plan or your contingency plan, it would have things in there that outlines what you can do if someone ended up getting triggered, or if someone had a reaction to something that's been said or done. And in that plan, you want to have clear processes outlined. You want to have clear contacts. If you are working with vulnerable people, I would also recommend having a social worker or a psychologist, just a practitioner who is qualified to provide support on hand and on phone, on call, so that you can, let's say a young person in the financial literacy workshop felt like triggered and they had to leave the room, you can then go to them, find a quiet, private space to talk to that young person, and then call up your, let's say, financial counselor that you have on your phone, and then let the young person speak to the financial counselor. So having clear steps outlined in your safety plan is really important, not just for, again, your audience members, but also just for yourself, because you're also human, and you need to think about taking care of yourself first as before you take care of other people. Collaboration. So online collaboration, again, you can use tools like Mural. If you're using Microsoft Teams whiteboard, it's not the best, but it's still better than nothing. And then in person, yeah, you could have like tactile things like sticky notes and poster paper. But if you're working with someone with low vision blindness, then it's going to have to be more verbal based. So you have to think about how you can continue engaging with people verbally, but also maybe give them something tactile to play with, like fidget toys or Play-Doh, something to keep their hands busy so that you're not so tense, so that people can relax and be comfortable in the space. Timing and breaks, very important. The human mind can't concentrate for more than 25 minutes at a time, approximately. That's why, the Pomodoro technique, when you use for studying or work, is like 20-ish minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. That same rule applies to running workshops. So if you are doing something online and let's say it's like a 3-hour long session, make sure you have breaks every 40 minutes, I would say, or 50 if you want to stretch it, to give people a chance to use the toilet, grab a tea, and just stretch as well. In the physical room, you can also build in your breaks by getting people to move from different locations. So let's say you do a plenary room and you do talks, then you want to get them into breakout rooms so we can then physically move them so that they can get up, walk, and go to a different room to do breakout sessions. So that's another way you can think about breaks as well. But yeah, basically, it's the considerations for both formats are the same. So an example for our session with, if let's say we did an online session with the students, when it comes to learning about financial literacy, we want to think about the accessibility guidelines, so WCAG. They have really good guidelines there for those who have low vision blindness, text alternatives like captions, transcripts. If you are using a Mural or Miro, spend 10 minutes before you start the session and give people a chance to play with the space. I know that even though we assume that most people are good with this stuff, and we used it so much during lockdown and COVID, there's still people who have never seen it before. So still spend that 10 minutes to give them a chance to navigate the board and give people enough time to interact and read the content. Do a test run with your design team as well. It's like a play. Like you can do a rehearsal with them as well if you like. And if you need more tips, I would just Google accessibility needs, and I'm sure you'll find some more there. In terms of physical spaces or physical sessions, it's always handy to have a sensory room or a quiet room for people to go to decompress. You could also think about having feminine hygiene products just in case anyone needs it. If you're working with Muslim communities, just be aware of prayer times. Ramadan, like fasting. And then with catering, if you are catering for food, think outside sandwiches. Everyone's a bit sick of sandwiches, so see if we can kind of find other snacks that are not sandwiches but also still cost friendly, like quiches, or it could be dumplings. Like think outside the box. It doesn't have to be a sandwich. And then yeah, have fidget toys or Play-Doh, like something tactile that people can play with, especially those who are a bit neurospicy. Like sometimes, like I know I find my hands like get itchy after a while, so I need something to fidget with. So having those around the grounds is really handy as well. Cool. So now that you've got all of that done, I want you to also then think about ethics, or I call it ethics because I'm an organizational psychologist, but they're basically considerations that you want to think about when you are working with people from vulnerable communities. So, like I mentioned before, reimbursement, making sure that you are paying your, well, it doesn't have to be like actual payment. It could be like in the form of food, could be in the form of taxi vouchers, gift cards. So just make sure you are reimbursing your lived experience participants in a way that is appropriate to the work that they will be doing for you. They are providing you with their expertise. So they should be seen as subject matter experts, not volunteers. Consent, like I mentioned, I think if you are working and co-designing with vulnerable communities, I would say it's important to write up an agreement, a consent agreement that details, what are their roles, what are the expectations from them, what are the expectations expectations from them, but also expectations of you as well. The roles of both parties, how much time do they are required from them, a contact person that they can ask questions or support, or a contact person to lodge any potential complaints or grievances with. Having that there gives them assurance that you are taking care of them, that they're not being taken advantage of, and that that everything is clear. Having said that, participants will always have the right to withdraw consent at any time. So if they, halfway through decide that they don't want to do this anymore, it's not, you shouldn't, try to convince them to stay. You should just, have a chance to like hear them out and like get feedback from them, and then thank them for their time as well. Like I said, having a safety plan. So for people who are in your co-design group, your design team, basically, as part of writing that detailed agreement, you would also want to get them to fill out a safety plan. Because in the safety plan, you can get them to think about, or to write down their history, their triggers, important contacts, a treatment plan, or things that you need to consider, or things that you can do to help support them if something does happen. And I highly, highly recommend, if you are unsure or if this feels like too much, just work with a qualified practitioner to guide you with this, whether that's a psychologist, a social worker. I would definitely partner with an organization who has the expertise and skills in this area, so that you're not also, working beyond your depth. And if in doubt, if it feels wrong, it probably is. So really trust your gut. Consult again with professionals before you take any action. If you're unsure, you could also just ask the lived experience person for the advice. Most of the time, they're really happy to just help and support you and like tell you what they need. So never assume anything. Just ask. It will save you a lot of trouble. And listen. Don't tell. Like again, like we're there to listen and learn from them, not tell them what to do. Because if you're telling people what to do, it also takes power away from them. You're basically taking away their voice. But if you're listening, you're basically empowering them to use their voice to tell you what they need and what they want. Hey, so then you've done all your planning, you've done your co-design. It's basically showtime. So before you do your delivery, I would say if you can, spend, depending again on how big your session is, spend the day before just doing any relevant prep. So that could be building the presentation or the plenary pack, writing any assignments, aka the work that you want your people to do. Create name tags if you're doing in-person session. Do a practice run, and yeah, go through the design from the top to the bottom with your project team, just so that everyone's clear on what the process is, what everyone's roles are, and things like that. And then when you're delivering the delivery day, I would always start the day with another, I call them a circular, or you probably heard of stand up, but we call it circular because we like to stand in a circle. So we have a circular to go through the design from the top to bottom again and think about making changes if needed. Because again, like not everything will go to plan. This is a play, not an agenda. Sometimes we have to improvise if we need, or tweak things based on how people respond to the content. And again, like during delivery, don't forget to take photos once you've got consent, recordings, notes, everything, so that after the session, you can then build whatever you need to build. You can think of running co-design workshops or sessions as knowledge mining or brain mining. You're there to mine all the information out of the people's heads and then turning into something that is tangible for you. And don't forget to breathe, because it can get quite stressful when you are running sessions. So after the session, you can compile all your photos, recordings, files together in a file structure. So work with your team to find out what file structure works best for you. And make sure you thank everyone who supported you, like the design team members, for their time and contribution. Send a thank you email to everyone who attended, and then a short feedback survey so you can also gather some metrics and feedback. And then last but not least, once you've done your session, you've closed it, as a team, then I highly recommend doing your own debriefing session to reflect on the whole process, record any thoughts, learnings, and considerations. A handy exercise could be a good, bad, better, best. So you can kind of, as a group, think about like the process and think about, what was kind of good about the session, what wasn't so good, what was pretty bad, what could have been better, and what was the best, what were the highlights. This is a really good reflection activity to get everyone thinking about different things. And then once you do that, you can then do a stop, start, continue, which is more action based. So depending on how much time you have, I highly recommend doing the good, bad, better, best first. And then from there, you can draw insights that you can then put and map against stop, start, continue as well. But yeah, that's basically designing inclusive workshops in a nutshell. I've put some case studies and resources here as well for your own reference. The APS Code of Ethics is the psychology one for Australia. May or may not be relevant, but it has some really good, I guess, guidelines in there that you might want to borrow. It's publicly available and all psychologists have to abide by it. So it's kind of handy to have a look if you're interested in psychology as well. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to jump on at the moment.
I have a question about like the last part you mentioned about the debrief. Do you think it's best practice to do the debrief on the same day or like a couple of days after, or how does that work?
I feel like ideally the same day, like straight after this session. It could be handy to get everyone together and just sit down and just reflect on everything that you've heard, and write down any notes that you can think of. So you do like an immediate debrief, and then maybe 1 or 2 days after, you would then have another meeting and talk about, okay, like to talk about what you're gonna do next, so next steps. And as part of that, you can then start thinking about your stop, start, continue as well, to make it more action focused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's actually pretty much it for me. Like, does anyone else have any questions?
Can you guys hear me? You can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was such a great session. I feel like I was part of that workshop that you created. Were we test subjects for this workshop? um, but also that wasn't the question. The question is like basically like when you try to do, let's just say, a lot of the work setting up yourself, like do you provide instructions to, let's just say, tell other people like what to do on the day, or are they really, should they really be involved from the very beginning so that their ideas get also become part of the input of how the workshop should work?
um it's a good question. I think like when it comes to roles, you could think about, so I'm just going to write a list here. So in terms of roles, you can think about it again like you're running a party or a play. So you have your stage manager, who is basically your process manager, and that could be you or someone else who is in charge of the process, making sure that everyone knows where they're going, what kind of inputs need to be put into what module. And then you could have someone in charge of the inputs and the environment. So let's say that this is the person who's in charge of the PowerPoint or the mural and just all the content. So like this is your content manager basically. And then you could have someone in charge of um, stakeholder management, or in I guess theater terms, they could be your usher. They make sure that people know where they're going, what seats to take. If they have questions, then the usher can like forward them, and basically like ushering the people. And then you could have someone who like records the content. So that could be like photographer or like a scribe, etc. So I would start talking about roles like on the prep day. You can talk about the different types of roles with your team. If you are by yourself though, it's a bit hard because then you end up doing everything. Um, I would say at least have one buddy so that you can both kind of work together to understand like who's going to take on what role. But I wouldn't expect the people like the design team members to be part of the delivery team. The design team members I would treat as participants. So when they do go to the session, they are actually receiving like the content and doing the activities. They're not like doing the behind the scenes stuff. Unless that's what they want to do. Like unless they say, "Hey, like I think this is a good professional development opportunity for me. Can I be part of the crew instead of being part of it, being a participant?" So, um, does that answer your question, Michelle?
Yeah, I think I just got confused because I initially thought that the design team was actually the people who were your team, like, because you call them like a team. So the design team is technically the participants. So they're the ones that, sign the consent form, and if they need help, they can go see a support worker or a social worker. Is
Yeah.
that the terminology you're using?
Yeah, so I would say the design team is like your SMEs, like the people who are your participants and user, um yeah, the people receiving the thing that you're designing. And then delivery team would be like the facilitator, the crew basically delivering the event. So let's say like this could be like CMX is delivering a finance event for international students, and then design team would be the international students, like
Okay,
representatives
that makes sense.
from that party.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zoe. I was wondering, do you like any of any good resources with regards to styles of delivery. Like, I get all the planning and stuff, and that was really helpful in terms of, like, mapping out what we need to consider. But in terms of actually turning it into a reality or, like, working through
Yep.
that kind of stuff, does that make sense?
Like different modalities, like different modules.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe I can go here. So there's different ways to kind of there's a lot of resources like there's a book called Collaboration by Design. It's got useful mods that you can use. Otherwise, you could also look into MG Taylor. Let me type that up. They also have like a playbook of different mods that you can do. Like examples would be. Well, let me stop sharing this way so I can actually use shapes. So like most often people do this. They just do like a plenary and like another plenary, blah blah blah. It's pretty boring. Another thing you can do is you can do chat rooms where you have, let's say, 3 smaller groups, and then you would do 3 rounds of that. Let's say, and then people at each round they could go one room, this room, and then next room. That's another example. So this is called chat rooms. You can do an idea rave, which is basically people individually. You give them you give them a piece of homework, and they individually go off and reflect and think about the questions that you're asking them. So idea raves, doing like individual work is really good for people who are introverts as well, because then they wouldn't feel comfortable speaking in a group. So you get them to do individual work first, and then you would then put people into groups. And then as a group, they would like share back what they kind of talked about. And then after they've done a group piece, like group work, you can get in switch the groups up. So like, let's say this group do another round of group work where one person from each of the first group would go to the next room, next group, and then you switch people up and then get them to give feedback. And then you always end with a debrief at the end. So something like that. But yeah, there are different ways to do it. I reckon like in the internet has so many resources on different workshop modalities.
I think
I'm
that's
happy
probably
to
just
chat
the word.
offline as well.
Yeah, I don't think I had the language for it. Workshop modalities. Like, I didn't know where to look, but that makes sense.
It could be like co-design modules, workshop modules or activities. What else? Yeah,
'Cause
I'm happy to have a chat as well offline, Brad. We can like brainstorm more
yeah, that'd be awesome.
if you need. I just the way we're at time. Sorry for going over time.
No worries, amazing. I think that was such a great session, Zoe. That is like very different from all the things that we usually talk about and learn, because this is like applying like a design concept into like building workshops for our community, and also being very very intentional about it. So like things that you said about like the intentional pauses in between, like when you are introducing a resource to your community, like people who are going through the design, like mirror, give them 10 minutes to get like used to it, right? Because like when Michelle and I was doing like our sessions, we used the Notion, and then like we were like, we actually sent it before like to our community members to get familiar with it, and then we went through it like on the day. So like things we have done, but like this sort of connects the dot, like that you have to sort of give the consideration, due consideration for those who are like taking part and giving them your time. And also the other thing was about how this workshop design is not just like when you think workshop design, we always think it is like for others, but it is also for you. So you have to give yourself due considerations in order to come out of the workshop with your energy intact, and like the have the learnings the way you want it, and be like, oh, okay, so I actually got something out of this and I am okay as well. So giving those considerations about like accessibility, and then also like having like practitioners or someone on call for you, when you have to face certain risks or certain like issues, that was really really important. And I think those conversations happen in like design and collaborative spaces outside of like community work that we do. So bringing that into community space was like such a good presentation. So thank you so much for that, Zoe. I think it's fair by everyone when if I say like that we all learned something, one or two things, like new things out of you as well from your fresh perspective. So thank you so much for that. Any final words that you would like to say before we wrap up?
I suppose like main takeaway I want people to think about is you're never doing this in isolation. Always ask for help, especially with design and creative work. Always just like ask someone else, like ask for like a buddy to kind of play back your thoughts with. Never do this alone, because you also have a community that you can lean on to get support.
That is actually true. Thank you so much. I think that's kind of like wraps up our event as well. Thank you for everyone who joined us. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Dulita. Thank you, Michelle. And yes, and thank you so much.